this video, we're going to be multiplying decimals by whole numbers using the area model and a little bit of distributive property as well. Let's go ahead and dive into it. So for this first problem, we are going to be using the distributive problem with our area model. So we've got 6 times 75 hundredths. 6 times 75 hundredths. We're going to break apart this 75 hundredths. And I know I can break apart 75 hundredths into 7 tenths and 5 hundredths. Because if I were to add 7 tenths and 5 hundredths, I would get 75 hundredths. So I know I'm going to break those apart. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it down. I'm going to say 6 times 7 tenths plus 6 times 5 hundredths. Now we're going to do a little bit of math. So over on the side over here, I'm going to go ahead and say 7 tenths times 6. 6 times 7 is 42. I'm going to swoop that decimal, drop it down, swoop it back in. I know my answer is going to be 4 and 2 tenths. Now let's do our 5 hundredths times 6. I know that 6 times 5 is 35. And we swoop 1, swoop twice, drop it down, swoop 1, swoop twice. I know I've got 0 and 30. Ooh, wow, 30 hundredths. 6 times 5 is not 35. It is 30. I hope you caught that. All right, so I know I've got 4 and 2 tenths plus 3 tenths or 30 hundredths. I'm going to go ahead and review how I got that. Remember, all I did is break apart this 75 hundredths into 7 tenths and 5 hundredths. Then I said 6 times 7 tenths plus 6 times 5 hundredths. Then we just went down. 6 times 7 tenths is 4 and 2 tenths. 6 times 5 hundredths is 3 tenths or 30 hundredths. Now all we have to do is add it together. 4 and 2 tenths plus 3 tenths is 4 and 5 tenths. So that's how I got the answer there. Let's go ahead and do it on the area model and see if we get the same answer. So over here, we've got the exact same problem. We're just kind of bringing it over. So I'm going to say 6 goes here, and we're going to have our 7 tenths here and our 5 hundredths here. We just broke apart that 75 hundredths, just like we did before. Let's go ahead and multiply. I know that 6 times 7 tenths is 4 and 2 tenths, because I've already done it over here. And I know that 6 times 5 hundredths is 3 tenths or 30 hundredths. So all you have to do is add those together, and my answer is the same with 4 and 5 tenths. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and dive into it with just an area model, no distributive property this time. We've got 31 times 5 and 4 tenths. So first things first, I'm going to break apart my 30. And I'm going to say 30 plus 1 gives me 31. So break it apart like you would your typical area model. And then I'm going to say 5 and 4 tenths. So let's go ahead. It's all broken apart. Let's start multiplying. 3 times 5 is 15. Need to make sure I add that 0. Gives me 150. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 4 tenths is 4 tenths because nothing changes there. Now we have to multiply our 30 times our 4 tenths. 4 times 0 is 0. 3 times 4 is 12. I don't need to multiply that 0 times anything because there's only a 0 there. Now let's swoop it out, drop it down, swoop it back. My answer is 12. So just like you would the regular area model, we're going to bring it out to the side here. And we're going to add everything up. Put my decimals in because I have a 4 tenths here at the end. 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 4. I've got a magical decimal line that I'm going to bring straight down. 2 plus 5 is 7. 1 plus 5 is 6. Bring down that 1. So I know my answer is 167 and 4 tenths. If you need a review of area model, that's totally fine. Remember with the area model, you multiply the numbers on the outside to get the numbers on the inside. And then you just add the numbers on the inside all together. And you've got your answer. Let's go ahead and try our next one. For this next one, we've got 25 times 1 and 3 tenths. I'm going to go ahead and break apart my 25 into 20 and 5. And break apart my 1 and 3 tenths into 1 and 3 tenths. Now we just multiply. 20 times 1 is 20. 1 times 5 is 5. Now we have to work it out. I need to do 20 times 3 tenths. Let's work that out. 3 times 0 is 0. 2 times 3 is 6. Let's get that swooping going. Swoop 1, drop it down, swoop 1. My answer is 6. Now 3/10 times 5. 3/10 times 5. I know 3 times 5 is 15. I see that 1 swoop. Remember, slow me down, back it up if you need to. Drop it down, swoop it back in once. We know that is 1 5/10. So I multiply my 20 and my 1 and got 20. My 5 and my 1 and got 5. My 5 and my 3/10, I got 1 5/10. And my 20 and my 3/10, I got 6. Now all I have to do is add it all together. I know 20 plus 6 is 26. And 5 plus 1 5/10 is going to be 6 5/10. So let's just add together 26 and 6 5/10. So I'm going to stack them up. 26 and 0/10 plus 6 5/10. 6 plus 6 is 12. 2 plus 1 is 2, or 2 plus 1 is 3. Bring down that magical decimal line. My answer is 32 5/10. I want you to try this next one on your own. We've got 13 times 57/100ths. Go ahead and try this one. For this one, you should have broken apart your 13 and said 10 and 3. And your 57/100ths, you should have had 5/10 and 7/100ths. Let's work it out. All right, so we need to multiply by decimals. So we're going to say 5/10 times 10. I'm actually going to flip that around. Let's say 10 times 5/10. There we go. 5 times 0 is 0. 1 times 5 is 5. Let's look at that swoop. 1 swoop out, drop it down, 1 swoop in. I know that 10 times 5/10 is 5. Let's do 5/10 times 3. 3 times 5 is 15. I've got that 1 swoop again, drop it down, bring it back, 1 5/10. So I know my 5/10 times 3 is 1 5/10. Now let's do our 7/10 times 10. I'll flip that around again too. I need to remember to keep it flipped around. 7/10 times 10. There are 2 swoops here. We're going to say 1 swoop, 2 swoop, drop it down. 1 swoop, 2 swoop. So my answer is going to be 7/10. Oh, not 7.7. Let's write that again. 0 7/10. Oh, let's look at this. This is super interesting. Do you notice that if I have 7/100ths and I multiply it by 10, I get 7/10? It's almost like that decimal moved one place to the right as the number got bigger because I multiplied it by 10. Go ahead and put that little fact back in your brain because you're going to need it later on next week when we start working with exponents and powers of 10 with our decimals. Now we have to multiply 7/10 times 3. I know 7 times 3 is 21. Let's swoop that decimal out twice, drop it down, swoop it back. I'm going to get 21/100. So for this one, I know 10 times 5/10 is 5. 3 times 5/10 is 1 5/10. 7/100ths times 10 is 7/10. And 7/100ths times 3 is 21/100ths. Looking good, looking good. Let's go ahead and add all of that up. So I know that 5, let's do 5 7/10. That would give me 5 7/10. And let's go ahead and add up the rest of these. I'm going to make sure my decimals are stacked correctly. I am going to draw my magical decimal line because I love the magical decimal line. And let's add this up. 0 plus 0 plus 1. 5 plus 2 is 7. 7 plus 7 is 14. 1 plus 5 is 6. Plus 1 is 7. So now my answer is 7 41/100, which I know you're saying, Miss Wilson, we started with 13. How do you only have 10? Guess what? We started with 13, but we multiplied it by a number less than 1. So my answer is going to drop lower than both of my factors. If we had thought about it as we did over here, I multiplied 23 times 1 3/10. Since that 1 3/10 is more than 1, when you multiply a whole number by it, you get a decimal that is higher than either of the factors. We're going to be practicing this a lot more today to be thinking about it. That's one interesting thing to remember as you're multiplying with decimals.